You were conditioned to believe that explanation is virtue, that if your intentions are pure, clarity will protect you. This belief is not moral, it is administrative. It exists to make you legible, manageable, and ultimately controllable. Power does not explain itself. Power is observed, not interrogated. When you clarify your motives, you reposition yourself beneath the listener. You are no longer acting, you are defending. Defense signals vulnerability. It announces that your actions require approval, that your identity is open for audit. In war, only occupied territory is required to justify its movements. Sovereign ground moves without permission. Silence fractures expectations. Humans are neurologically disturbed by unanswered questions. They crave narrative completion the way a drowning man craves air. When you refuse to explain, the other party experiences cognitive imbalance. Their mind scrambles to stabilize the uncertainty. And in doing so, they reveal their fears, assumptions, and intentions. You learn more by saying nothing than by speaking perfectly. This is the first inversion. You must accept. Clarity serves the weak. The strong do not illuminate themselves. They allow others to miscalculate. Ambiguity is not confusion, it is camouflage. A predator does not announce the direction of its strike. It lets the prey guess, hesitate, expose itself. Notice who demands explanations from you. It is never someone above you. Superiors observe outcomes. Equals test boundaries. Subordinates ask why to evaluate whether they can challenge, delay, or disobey. The request for motive is rarely innocent. It is reconnaissance. When you comply, you leak structure. Your values, priorities, limits, and emotional triggers spill out under the disguise of honesty. Now your behavior is predictable. Now your future moves can be anticipated. Now your words can be used against you out of context, out of time, under pressure you did not choose. Silence, by contrast, reverses the interrogation. The one who asked is now exposed to their own discomfort. They must decide, press harder and reveal aggression, or retreat and reveal submission. Either way, you gain data. This is surgical dominance, minimal movement, maximum extraction. Do not confuse this with passivity. Silence is active restraint. It is a held blade. You are not avoiding conflict. You are controlling the terrain on which it occurs. When you speak, it is because the timing benefits you, not because someone demanded access to your reasoning. Understand this clearly. Explanations do not build trust. They build files. And files are used later when the environment turns hostile and your past words are no longer yours to control. Power keeps its interior sealed. This chapter's rule is simple and merciless. If your action requires explanation, it was never sovereign. Learn to let outcomes speak. Let silence destabilize. Let others chase clarity while you remain uncontained. Humans cannot tolerate emptiness. Silence is not neutral to them, it is an open wound in the mind. When motives are unclear, the brain panics and begins manufacturing explanations. This is not imagination. It is self-defense. The mind fills gaps to regain control. Whoever withholds explanation creates a vacuum. Whoever fills it loses power. This is the mechanism you must understand and weaponize. When you refuse to clarify your intentions, you do not leave the story unfinished, you force the other party to finish it for you. And they will finish it using their own fears, desires, insecurities, and moral biases. The projection is automatic. They assume manipulation because they would manipulate. They assume hostility because they are hostile. They assume weakness because they are afraid of being seen as weak. This is the tell. In poker. Silence after a raise reveals more than any speech. In interrogation, the longest pause is more effective than any threat. In politics, ambiguity preserves coalitions that clarity would fracture. The same law applies interpersonally. The moment you explain, you collapse multiple interpretations into one fixed narrative. You reduce your optionality. You choose a box and boxes are easy to attack. The narrative vacuum gives you 3 advantages. First, information extraction. People speak more when you speak less. They overjustify. They overreact. They expose what they care about by what they accuse you of. Their questions are not requests, they are mirrors. Listen carefully. The accusation is the confession. Second, deniability. An unclear motive cannot be proven wrong. Once you define your intent, you can be judged against it. Until then, you are ungraspable. You are not lying, you are unlocatable. This terrifies people who rely on moral leverage, because moral leverage requires a pinned identity. Third, narrative control over time. Silence allows your meaning to shift with context. What you did yesterday can be interpreted differently tomorrow depending on outcomes. Clarification freezes you in a past frame. Power operates forward. Explanations drag you backward. This is why institutions demand transparency from individuals but practice opacity themselves. Transparency is for those being managed. Opacity is for those managing outcomes. The system understands this even if you were trained not to. There is also a darker truth. People resent being denied access to your interior. They feel entitled to your reasons. That entitlement is the early signal of an attempt to dominate or morally bind you. By not clarifying, you refuse the contract. You remain external to their control schema. Do not underestimate how destabilizing this is. When someone cannot categorize you, they cannot plan against you. When they cannot plan, they hesitate. Hesitation is weakness. In environments of competition, hesitation is fatal. This chapter's rule is strategic and cold. Never rush to fill silence. Let the vacuum do the work. Let others reveal themselves trying to stabilize it. You do not control the narrative by speaking. You control it by forcing others to speak for you. Power hierarchies are not defined by titles. They are defined by who explains and who never does. Once you see this, you will never unsee it. Human behavior around motive clarification falls into 3 predictable archetypes. Each one signals position, threat level, and long-term outcome. The first archetype is the explicable. This is the most common and the most expendable. The explicable believes transparency equals safety. He clarifies preemptively, apologizes unnecessarily, and narrates his decisions before anyone asks. His speech is defensive by default. He thinks he is being reasonable. In reality, he is advertising permission to be challenged. The explicable's need to be understood is a liability. It comes from social conditioning. Be good, be fair, be clear. But in competitive environments, clarity is not rewarded, it is harvested. Every explanation becomes a handle. Every justification becomes leverage. Over time, the explicable is not respected. He is managed. Others feel entitled to his reasoning, then his compliance, then his obedience. The second archetype is the interrogator. This figure demands clarity from others while offering none himself. He asks why under the disguise of curiosity, fairness, or teamwork. But the function is extraction. He wants to map your logic, your values, your emotional thresholds. He is not seeking truth, he is testing dominance. The interrogator grows hostile when denied explanations. Watch this carefully. The emotional reaction reveals intent. Calm inquiry turns into pressure. Pressure turns into moral accusation. This escalation exposes the real goal, control through forced transparency. Once you explain, He reframes your words and uses them to limit your future movement. The interrogator fears ambiguity because ambiguity removes his advantage. He needs legibility in others to maintain his position. Silence threatens him. That is why he pushes harder when you withhold. The push is not strength. It is panic. The third archetype is the architect. This is the rare one. The architect moves without explanation and does not ask for them either. He watches behavior, not stories. He judges outcomes, not intentions. When he speaks, it is deliberate, minimal, and late. His silence is not emptiness, it is containment. The architect understands that motives are private infrastructure. Exposing them weakens the structure. He allows others to speculate, misinterpret, even accuse. He knows that time and results will do the clarifying for him on his terms. Here is the critical shift you must make. Stop identifying with the explicable. Stop reacting to the interrogator. Begin modeling the architect. This does not mean becoming erratic or theatrical. It means becoming unreadable by design. You answer questions with outcomes. You respond to pressure with calm non-engagement. You do not reward invasive curiosity. You let discomfort sit in the room until it belongs to the one who created it. The moment you stop explaining, roles reverse. The explicable becomes uneasy. The interrogator becomes exposed. The architect becomes visible. This chapter's rule is unforgiving. If you are the one clarifying, you are not the one in control. Choose your archetype deliberately because others already have. History does not punish cruelty. It punishes transparency. This is the pattern they never teach you because teaching it would destabilize obedience. The men who fell were not always weak. They were often sincere. They explained themselves. They believed their intentions would protect them. They were wrong. Rulers who clarified motives too early invited coalitions against them. Generals who revealed strategy in the name of trust lost wars. Political figures who spoke honestly created permanent records that outlived context, alliances, and necessity. Their words were later used as weapons by enemies who never played fair to begin with. Ambiguity, by contrast, preserved power. Consider how empires expanded. Declarations were vague. Intentions were framed as necessity, defense, or inevitability. Clarity only arrived after dominance was established, when explanation no longer mattered. The narrative was written backward from victory. This is not deception. It is sequencing. Human nature has not evolved past this. Modern environments only disguise the same instincts with procedural language. Corporations demand mission statements while shielding internal decision-making. Governments preach transparency while classifying what actually matters. Institutions survive because they understand the asymmetry. Those who explain are exposed. Those who delay remain protected. The same law applies at the individual level. When you explain your motive, you freeze yourself in time. Your words become artifacts. They are replayed under new moral climates, new power structures, new incentives. What was reasonable then becomes suspicious now. What was justified becomes criminalized. Clarity has a long memory. Power does not. Ambiguity adapts. Silence allows reinterpretation. If circumstances change, your past actions can be reframed as foresight, necessity, or restraint. If outcomes succeed, motives are forgiven. If outcomes fail, explanations only accelerate blame. This is why the demand for clarity always precedes punishment. First they ask you to explain, then they dissect, then they condemn. The process requires your cooperation. Without your words, they struggle to build the case. History also reveals something darker. The public prefers narratives over truth. They want stories that confirm existing beliefs. When you clarify, you hand them a story they can distort. When you remain unclear, they are forced to create their own, and those stories conflict, cancel, and collapse. Power survives in contradiction. Clarity eliminates contradiction. That is why clarity feels moral but functions as exposure. This chapter is not about admiration of tyrants or nostalgia for brutality. It is about pattern recognition. The environment rewards results, not intentions. Those who waited to be understood were selected out. Those who acted first and explained later, if ever, remained. This chapter's rule is historical and cold. Explanation is for the defeated. Victory speaks fluently without words. History does not punish cruelty. It punishes transparency. This is the pattern they never teach you, because teaching it would destabilize obedience. The men who fell were not always weak. They were often sincere. They explained themselves. They believed their intentions would protect them. They were wrong. Rulers who clarified motives too early invited coalitions against them. Generals who revealed strategy in the name of trust lost wars. Political figures who spoke honestly created permanent records that outlived context, alliances, and necessity. Their words were later used as weapons by enemies who never played fair to begin with. Ambiguity, by contrast, preserved power. Consider how empires expanded. Declarations were vague. Intentions were framed as necessity, defense, or inevitability. Clarity only arrived after dominance was established, when explanation no longer mattered. The narrative was written backward from victory. This is not deception. It is sequencing. Human nature has not evolved past this. Modern environments only disguise the same instincts with procedural language. Corporations demand mission statements while shielding internal decision-making. Governments preach transparency while classifying what actually matters. Institutions survive because they understand the asymmetry. Those who explain are exposed. Those who delay remain protected. The same law applies at the individual level. When you explain your motive, you freeze yourself in time. Your words become artifacts. They are replayed under new moral climates, new power structures, new incentives. What was reasonable then becomes suspicious now. What was justified becomes criminalized. Clarity has a long memory. Power does not. Ambiguity adapts. Silence allows reinterpretation. If circumstances change, your past actions can be reframed as foresight, necessity, or restraint. If outcomes succeed, motives are forgiven. If outcomes fail, explanations only accelerate blame. This is why the demand for clarity always precedes punishment. First, they ask you to explain. Then they dissect. Then they condemn. The process requires your cooperation. Without your words, they struggle to build the case. History also reveals something darker. The public prefers narratives over truth. They want stories that confirm existing beliefs. When you clarify, you hand them a story they can distort. When you remain unclear, they are forced to create their own, and those stories conflict, cancel, and collapse. Power survives in contradiction. Clarity eliminates contradiction. That is why clarity feels moral but functions as exposure. This chapter is not about admiration of tyrants or nostalgia for brutality. It is about pattern recognition. The environment rewards results, not intentions. Those who waited to be understood were selected out. Those who acted first and explained later, if ever, remained. This chapter's rule is historical and cold. Explanation is for the defeated. Victory speaks fluently without words. There is a version of you that must die if you intend to hold power. Not symbolically, functionally. This version believes being understood is safety. It believes clarity earns trust. It believes that if people know your reasons, they will judge you fairly. This self is not moral, it is domesticated. The honest self was engineered for systems, not sovereignty. It was trained to externalize its interior, to narrate thoughts, intentions, doubts, and logic. This made it predictable. Predictability made it governable. And governance was sold to you as cooperation. In reality, it was containment. To never clarify motives permanently. You must accept that being misunderstood is not a threat, it is a shield. The honest self panics under ambiguity. It feels exposed when others speculate. It rushes to correct the record, to set things straight, to reclaim moral ground. That impulse is the last chain. As long as you feel compelled to defend your identity, it does not belong to you. Identity death begins when you stop correcting narratives that do not materially threaten you. Let accusations exist without response. Let assumptions circulate without clarification. Let people argue about your intentions while you continue operating. This creates a separation. Your actions move forward while their interpretations remain stuck. Power always advances faster than commentary. The replacement identity is colder, but more stable. This identity does not seek validation through transparency. It understands that trust built on explanation is fragile and reversible. Instead, it builds authority through consistency of outcome and scarcity of access. People do not trust what they fully understand. They trust what repeatedly works. This is where most men fail. They want power without isolation. They want sovereignty without distance. They want control while still being liked. These desires are incompatible. Selection does not reward comfort, it rewards containment. When you kill the honest self, you stop narrating your inner world. You become surface only. What people see is what you choose to show. Decisions, movement, results. Your interior becomes irrelevant to outsiders. This is not deception. This is boundary enforcement at the highest level. You will notice a shift. Conversations shorten. Pushback softens. Probing questions decrease. Not because people trust you more, but because they realize there is nothing to extract. The interrogation economy collapses when the subject stops participating. This is the final psychological inversion before full sovereignty. Privacy is not secrecy, and silence is not guilt. Silence is structure. It is the architecture of power. This chapter's rule is terminal. The self that needs to be understood cannot coexist with dominance. One must be buried so the other can operate. This is where the separation becomes irreversible. Once you stop clarifying motives, you will attract pressure, not curiosity. The question why will arrive disguised as concern, alignment, fairness, or transparency. Do not be deceived. By this stage, anyone still demanding your reasons is not seeking understanding. They are seeking access. Access is control. People ask why when they intend to judge, redirect, or neutralize. If they respected your position, they would evaluate outcomes and adapt. The insistence on motive is the last tool of those who cannot influence results. It is an attempt to regain leverage through moral framing. This is your final warning. The moment you explain under pressure, you reset the hierarchy against yourself. You teach them that persistence works. You show them that discomfort forces compliance. You demonstrate that your boundaries are negotiable. From that moment forward, silence becomes harder, and interrogation becomes standard. Understand the cost of mastery. You will not be understood by everyone. You will not be defended by narratives. You will not be protected by intentions. You will be judged by outcomes alone. This is the price of operating above the emotional economy of explanation. Most men will fail here, not because they lack intelligence, but because they crave absolution. They want someone to say, "I get it." Power does not offer absolution. It offers position. If you adopt this rule fully, your environment will change. Some people will withdraw. Others will watch more closely. A few will attempt confrontation. These are not threats. They are confirmation. The system is recalibrating around your new boundaries. Your final directive is simple and merciless. Never clarify motives to calm tension.